The August air in the delta carried a false kindness. It wasn't cold, it wasn't warm, just heavy enough to press against the lungs. Jethro Strings McKenna sat outside his juke joint on an old wooden crate, guitar resting against his thigh. The dirt road in front of Strings lay empty, sun-bleached and still. Spanish moss hung low from the trees beyond the clearing, swaying like tired ghosts. A faint breeze drifted in off the delta flats. Jethro glanced up once at the hand-painted sign above the door. Strings, cold beer, hot blues. He smiled, not wide, just enough. He remembered smoky clubs up north, Chicago brick, crowded rooms, men talking too loud, women leaning close. He remembered counting tips under flickering lights, sleeping in boarding houses, saving every dollar he could until he could buy this small patch of Mississippi dirt. This was his. No club owner watching him, no manager cutting his set short, just wood, wire, and sky. He lowered his gaze back to the guitar and began searching for something new. Fingers walking slowly across steel. A bend, a slide, a note that wavered just long enough to feel like memory. The blues drifted out across the clearing into the trees. The cicadas were loud at first, then they weren't. It happened so subtly he didn't notice. The rhythm of insects faded mid-chirp. The breeze that had been stirring the moss settled without warning. The delta held its breath. Jethro played on. A low minor progression rolled from the strings, vibrating against the wood of the juke joint. The sound seemed to travel farther than it should have, not fading, just stretching. And then something moved at the tree line, not fast, not crashing through brush, just stepping. A dark shape separated itself from shadow. It waded through the shallow edge of swamp water without a splash. Mud clung thick to its legs. Black fur, almost blue in the afternoon light, hung heavy from a broad-barreled chest. Long arms swayed low at its sides, nearly brushing the water surface. 9 feet tall, maybe more. Jethro still hadn't seen it, but he smelled it. The air shifted, rotten eggs, wet fur, river mud, and something older beneath it. Animal and sour and deeply wrong. His fingers faltered on a note. Just once. He lifted his head slowly, turned, and saw it standing at the edge of the clearing, towering, muscular, still. The fur was matted, dark from river water. Mud caked its calves. Its face was mostly animal. Heavy brow, wide nose, jaw thick enough to crush bone, but the eyes, golden brown, not glowing, not wild, aware.
It's 1945. The war is over. But not everything that followed those boys home stayed overseas. Down in the Mississippi Delta, where the air hangs thick and the river keeps secrets, a young musician is trying to carve his name into the world one note at a time. Jethro Strings McKenna, 27 years old, calloused hands, haunted eyes. He built a small juke joint off a dirt road and named it Strings. He thinks his music speaks to the people who fill his bar at night. He's about to learn. It speaks to something else, something older than the Delta, something that has been listening long before the blues were born. Welcome to Obsidian Quill Publishing. Nightmares. Before we begin, I want to thank you for tuning in. None of this is possible without your support. If you enjoy stories like this, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. It's free, and it helps this channel grow more than you know. You'll also find links to my books and merchandise in the comments. Every purchase helps keep the lights on and the nightmares coming. Now, turn the lights down. Let the Delta air settle in. Tonight's story: The Last Song of Jethro McKenna.
The creature was not baring its teeth, not advancing. It stood there, listening. The sound of Jethro's guitar lingered between them like something alive. For a long moment, neither moved. The Delta remained silent, and for the first time since the war, Jethro felt something that he promised he wouldn't feel again. Fear. The creature tilted its head slowly, not confused, measuring. Its golden brown eyes shifted from Jethro to the guitar, then back again. The air between them felt tight as wire. "Easy, big fella," Jethro said, his voice low, steady, the same tone he'd used once to calm a nervous mule. Inside, his heart was hammering hard enough to shake his ribs. The creature did not move closer. It raised one massive arm, long fingers, thick, dark, mud-caked, extended slightly, not reaching for him, reaching toward the guitar. It wasn't a point, not quite, more like a gesture of focus, as if it understood where the sound had come from. Jethro swallowed. He took one small step back, just instinct, just enough to put space between them. The creature's reaction was immediate. A rumble rolled from its chest, deep and low, like fury trapped in a barrel. Not a full roar, but a warning. The sound vibrated in the ground beneath Jethro's boots. He froze. The growl didn't rise. It didn't escalate. It simply waited. Jethro looked at the guitar in his hands, then at the creature, then back at the guitar. Slowly, carefully, he stepped forward again and lowered himself back onto the crate. The wood creaked beneath his weight. The creature's growl faded. He rested the slide against the strings. His fingers trembled once. Then he played. A low note bent and stretched into the air. The rumble stopped completely. The creature's head tilted again. Its shoulders loosened. The massive chest rose and fell in slower rhythm. Jethro played. Another note, then another. The sound drifted out across the clearing, softer now, cautious, almost questioning. The creature did not blink. It stood there like an old tree that had decided to listen. And as the melody grew steadier, something changed in the space between them. Jethro didn't know how he knew, but he felt it. The creature wasn't just standing there, it was listening. Not the way a man listens, not the way a crowd claps or sways. Something deeper, something almost hungry, not for flesh, for feeling. Jethro bent the note long and slow, letting it cry just enough before easing it back down. The sound rolled across the clearing and slipped between the trees. The Bigfoot's chest rose, fell, its massive head tilted slightly as if following the melody. For a few minutes more they stayed like that, man and myth, strings and silence. Then the creature exhaled, a heavy rumbling huff that stirred dust from the ground. It shifted its weight, turned, and before stepping back into the tree line, it paused. Its head dipped once, not submissive, not bowing, acknowledging. Then it moved into the curtain of Spanish moss hanging from the cypress limbs, and the forest swallowed it whole. The cicadas resumed. The breeze returned. The Delta pretended nothing had happened. Jethro lowered the guitar slowly. He muttered under his breath. "See you later, big fella." He didn't know why he said it, but it felt right. He stepped inside strings, the wooden boards creaking beneath his boots. The interior smelled of pine sap, spilled whiskey, and old smoke. He set the guitar carefully against the wall, then pulled on his clean shirt and dark jacket. He adjusted his suspenders, ran a cloth over his shoes until they caught the light. Friday night needed a crowd, and crowds didn't gather themselves. The dirt road into town was long and flat, stretching toward low wooden buildings and a faded church steeple in the distance. He walked slow, hands in his pockets, sun beginning to dip, and with every step, he couldn't shake the feeling not of being hunted, but of being expected. He glanced once toward the tree line. Nothing moved. Still, he wondered if it was out there, waiting, and if he played again tomorrow afternoon, would it come back? Would it stand in the same place? Would it listen? Jethro gave a faint, thoughtful smile. "Maybe," he murmured to himself. "Maybe I'll do a private show tomorrow." The town was small enough that a man's footsteps carried and his face and name were easily recognized. Wooden storefronts leaned slightly toward one another like they were listening. A single street lamp flickered near the church. The sky had turned the color of cooling embers. Jethro pushed open the screen door to Mrs. Ruby's diner. The bell above it chimed. "Evening, folks," he said, nodded his head politely. Conversations dipped, just enough for polite replies and friendly banter. Mrs. Ruby's eyes flicked toward him from behind the counter. She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. She gave the smallest nod and motioned toward the back booth, the one near the kitchen. Out of direct sight from the front windows, Jethro slid into the seat. "2 specials," he said quietly, "and coffee, 2 slices of pie, please." "For yourself?" the waitress asked without humor. He didn't answer. He just turned and waited. A few minutes later, the diner door chimed again. Heads turned this time. She stepped in carefully. Jessica Dunham, long coat despite the heat, head scarf tied low, trying to disappear in a place that didn't want her seen. Every eye in the diner knew, but no one said it out loud. She moved straight to the back booth, didn't hesitate, didn't look around. She leaned down and kissed him softly on the cheek. Too familiar, too dangerous. "Evening," she whispered. They sat. They ate. They kept their voices low. "He'll be back tomorrow," she said, stirring her coffee, though she didn't drink it. "He's tired. Fell asleep early tonight. I'll just wait till he's good and out. Then I'll come by." Her tone tried to sound casual. It wasn't. Jethro watched her over the rim of his cup. He had met Jessica in Chicago after a show. She liked the way he played, said he made her feel something she hadn't felt before. One night became 2. 2 became something else, something reckless. He had left Chicago thinking the chapter had closed. Then he built strings. And somehow they found each other again. She was married to a middle-aged mill foreman, respected in the town and taken care of like most women her color. Yet Jessica wanted more. She wanted music and romance, and she would do anything to get it. It was dangerous. And worse than dangerous, it was becoming predictable. Jethro knew she wasn't going to leave her husband. He wasn't going to ask her to. The lines were drawn and ignored at the same time. He set his fork down slowly. Jethro knew exactly what that meant. He studied her face for a long second, reading the calculation behind her smile. "We gotta be more careful, Jess," he said quietly. She leaned back in the booth, amused in a way that made his stomach tighten. "That's why you gotta leave by 12:30, she said. "No later." The way she said it wasn't romantic. It was strategic. Jethro shook his head slowly. "Go on," he muttered. "Leave the back door open. I'll pay the check and head over." Jessica stood first, pulled her coat tighter, adjusted her scarf. She didn't look at anyone else in the diner, and that was worse than if she had. She stepped outside into the humid night and crossed the street quickly, heels tapping against wood planks, then turning onto the darker road that led toward her house. Jethro watched through the reflection in the window until she disappeared into shadow. He finished his coffee. It had gone cold. He paid at the counter. Mrs. Ruby didn't look at the money first. She looked at him. Her eyes weren't angry. They were tired. "Boy," she said low enough that the room didn't carry it, "you dancing with the devil messing with that married white woman." Jethro exhaled through his nose, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "If you was my son," she continued, "I'd beat some sense into you." He nodded his head slightly. "And if I was your son, Miss Ruby," he said with a grin, "I would have to cut you off after your third beer last week at Strings." A few men nearby chuckled, but Mrs. Ruby didn't. Her gaze followed him all the way to the door. It wasn't judgment. It was warning. Jethro stepped out into the night and headed in the same direction Jessica had gone, his shoes steady against the dirt road. He couldn't shake the feeling that something else was watching tonight, too. Not from the trees, from behind windows, from inside trucks idling too long. The woods were patient, but men were not. Jethro made it back to Strings a little after 1 in the morning. The town lights had faded behind him. The Delta swallowed sound the way it swallowed secrets. Each step along the dirt road felt louder than it should have. Gravel shifting, insects cutting off mid-chirp, the wind dragging slow through Spanish moss like something breathing. Mrs. Ruby's words stayed with him. "You dancing with the devil, boy." He told himself she meant Jessica. He hoped she meant Jessica. He rounded the corner of the juke joint and froze. Something was wrong, not broken, not disturbed, arranged. Right beside the crate where he played each afternoon lay a large eagle feather, clean, intact, resting across 3 pine cones positioned in a perfect triangle. Small river stones stacked neatly beside them, placed with intention. Jethro's mouth went dry. He scanned the tree line. The swamp stared back. He crouched slowly, careful, like the offering might explode if he moved too fast. "This ain't funny," he whispered. No answer, only the distant plop of something sliding into water. He picked up the feather. It was still warm. Jethro stood there a long moment, heart knocking heavy against his ribs. Then he forced a breath. "Guess I'm playing again tomorrow." He told himself that like it was his idea. The next afternoon he sat on the crate and strummed. He kept one eye on the trees. The first branch cracked behind him nearly made him drop the guitar. The creature stepped out slowly, 9 feet tall, dark fur slick and matted from river water. Mud clung to its calves. Its arms hung low, almost dragging, and those eyes, golden brown, reflecting lantern light, aware, not human, but thinking. Jethro didn't stop playing, didn't dare. The creature stayed at the edge that day, watching, listening. The next afternoon it stood closer, close enough that Jethro could smell it. Rotten eggs, wet fur, something feral and old. The music felt different when it was there, thicker, like the notes were sinking into mud before reaching the air. By the 4th day, it stood within 10 feet. By the 6th, it didn't stop at the trees. It walked straight out of the swamp, each step slow, measured, testing him. Jethro's fingers trembled on the strings, but he kept playing. He had seen Jessica twice that week, slipping into the back door after midnight, perfume and whispered laughter in the dark. Her presence calmed him, reminded him he still belonged to the human world, that he wasn't losing his mind. He held on to that comfort, because each afternoon the creature came closer, until finally, one humid, silent evening, it lowered itself beside him, not crouched, not ready to spring, just sitting, close enough that Jethro could feel heat radiating from its body, close enough to hear the slow, cavernous inhale of its lungs between chords. His heart thundered so loudly he was sure the creature could hear it. He did not look at it, did not speak. He played. The bigfoot tilted its head. The growl that lived in its chest softened into something almost like a rumble of approval. And in that terrible, quiet moment, Jethro realized something far more frightening than being hunted. He was being accepted. But the Delta doesn't allow two worlds to touch without consequence, and somewhere beyond the trees, something else was listening. The next afternoon, Jethro arrived early. Too early. The swamp hadn't fully settled into its usual rhythm yet. The insects were quieter. The wind felt stalled. He set the crate down in its usual place, wiped his palms on his trousers, then, after a moment of hesitation, he pulled 3 apples from a paper sack and placed them carefully in the dirt beside the lantern post. A peace offering, or maybe a thank you. He didn't examine which. He sat, rested the guitar across his knee, began tuning. The Delta answered with silence, then a shift. Out of the corner of his eye, trees moved, not swaying, pushing. Wood cracked somewhere deep in the tree line. Jethro didn't look. He started strumming instead, soft at first, a low blues progression, waiting. The smell came next, that familiar sour rot of wet fur and river mud, but stronger, sharper, coppery, like rust, like blood left too long in heat. His stomach tightened. That wasn't right. The air thickened around him, pressing against his skin. Sweat broke along his neck, though the breeze had gone cold. He kept playing, because stopping felt like surrender. A shadow shifted behind him, heavy breathing, not the slow, cavernous inhale he'd grown used to. This was faster, hungrier, then a growl. Low, vibrating, but wrong. It didn't rumble with curiosity, it crackled with intent. Jethro's fingers faltered, just slightly. He turned his head and froze. 10 feet away, crouched low in the dirt, was not his silent listener. It stood 7 feet tall at the shoulder, black fur, slick and coarse, but its body was leaner, but still muscular, its legs bent like a dog's and muscular, built for speed. Its head, timber wolf, long snout, pointed ears pointed upwards, appearing longer against its skull. Its yellow cat, like eyes burned with focused finality, as if it was proclaiming, "I am a predator and you are my prey." Its claws dug into the soil, ready to spring. Thick saliva dripped from its fangs, stretching in slow strands to the ground. Jethro froze, looking at the dark stains along the fur of its forearms. It was blood, and it was still wet. Jethro's heart slammed so hard he felt it in his throat. The apples lay untouched between them. The creature's nostrils flared. It shifted its weight. Muscle coiled. Jethro's mind screamed at him to run, but something older told him that turning his back would be the last mistake he ever made. The guitar string twanged faintly beneath his trembling hand. The creature's lips peeled back further. A snarl cut the air like torn metal. But somewhere, deep in the trees, something larger moved. Jethro blinked, and the forest erupted. The ground shuddered beneath his boots, not like thunder, like something heavy striking earth at full speed. The dogman reacted first. Its ears snapped flat against its skull, its head whipped sharply to the left, lips curling as a warning snarl tore from its throat. Too late. A massive black shape exploded from the tree line, branches shattered, wood cracked like rifle fire. The impact sounded like two trucks colliding. The creature slammed into the dogman, sending both monsters tumbling across the dirt path in a violent storm of fur, mud, and broken brush. Jethro stumbled backward, guitar slipping from his hands. The world became noise, growls, snapping jaws, soil tearing beneath claws. Then the Bigfoot rose, not calm, not curious, furious, its massive hands locked around a dogman's skull and throat, fingers sinking deep into fur and muscle. The wolf creature thrashed wildly, claws raking, jaws snapping inches from its attacker's face. The Bigfoot twisted, hard. The sound came sharp and sudden, bones cracking like firecrackers in the summer heat. Jethro flinched, turning his head as the dogman's body went slack for half a heartbeat. But the Bigfoot didn't stop. It seized the creature by its legs, lifted the 7-foot predator overhead as if it weighed nothing. For one impossible second, the delta fell silent. Then it brought the body down. The impact shook the ground. A sickening crunch split the air as earth and bone gave way beneath the blow. Dust and leaves burst outward. The swamp birds erupted from the trees in frightened flight. The Bigfoot stood slowly, breathing hard, chest rising like a bellows. It stepped forward from the settling haze and stopped in front of Jethro, then turned as if it was shielding him, close enough that Jethro felt the heat rolling from its body. Mud dripped from its arms. Its massive silhouette blocked the dying sunlight. Then it threw its head back and roared. The sound rolled across the delta like an earthquake. Water rippled in the swamp. Windows rattled inside strings. The roar carried miles through cypress and river fog, ancient, territorial, final. Jethro stood frozen, heart hammering, realizing with terrible clarity the thing that listened to his music was also something the woods feared, and it was protecting him. That Friday night, Strings was alive. Lantern lights spilled through dusty windows while laughter and music rolled out into the Delta night. The wooden floor trembled beneath stomping boots and spinning dresses. Bottles clinked. Sweat shined on faces flushed from whiskey and summer heat. The place drank harder than it ever had since opening. Danced harder, too, because Jethro Strings McKenna was playing like a man possessed. Some folks said he earned his nickname because of how fast he could rest-string a busted guitar between songs. Others swore it came from nights he played so long his fingertips split open and bled across steel wire. But tonight, they called him Strings for another reason. The guitar howled, it cried, it sang like something alive beneath his hands. Notes bent and twisted through the smoke-filled room, rising and crashing like a storm rolling across the river. The sound carried violence in it, grief tangled with fury, as if Jethro were retelling something no words could hold. Two forces colliding, claw against bone, thunder shaking earth. The band struggled to follow him, sometimes catching the rhythm, sometimes falling back entirely, letting him stand alone beneath the lantern glow while the guitar spoke for him. People stopped dancing just to watch. Even Mrs. Ruby leaned against the bar, shaking her head slowly. "Lord have mercy," she muttered. Jethro didn't see the crowd anymore, didn't see the room. He played what he had witnessed, and the Delta listened. Hours later, the last song faded. Chairs scraped. Laughter drifted out into the warm night as patrons stumbled home beneath moonlight. Jethro wiped sweat from his face and set the guitar down carefully. That's when she approached. Nola, caramel skin glowing beneath lantern light, brown eyes warm and curious, a red dress that moved like flame when she walked, a matching flower tucked gently into her hair. She smiled easy, unafraid. "You the man making all that noise tonight?" she teased. Jethro laughed, tired but loose from the music. "Depends who asking." They talked, then laughed, then talked longer. An easy conversation filled with commonality and warmth. For the first time in weeks, Jethro felt light, relieved, alive in a way that didn't come from danger or shadows in the trees. Neither of them noticed the doorway or the figure standing just beyond the lantern light. Jessica Dunham watched from the darkness outside Strings, her scarf pulled low, hands clenched tight at her sides. The laughter drifting between Jethro and Nola cut deeper than betrayal. It replaced her, and in her eyes, something cold settled, something sharp. The faintest glint of hatred caught the light before she turned away. Inside, Jethro laughed again. Outside, Jessica swore revenge as she stormed away. Saturday morning came warm and bright. The Delta looked innocent again. Sunlight spilled through the front windows of Mrs. Ruby's diner, catching dust in the air while the smell of buttered grits and frying eggs filled the room. Jethro sat across from Nola in a booth near the front, not hiding, not whispering, laughing. For once, life felt simple. Nola stirred her coffee, smiling as she watched him eat. "You know," she said, leaning forward, "Strings could use a woman's touch." Jethro chuckled. "You trying to take over my place already?" "I'm serious," she said. "We fix it up proper. Curtains, tables that don't wobble, maybe expand." He nodded slowly. "A partnership?" "A future," she corrected softly. They talked about music, about money, about children someday running barefoot behind the juke joint while evening songs drifted through the trees. Maybe one day closing Strings all together, raising a family somewhere quieter. Even Mrs. Ruby noticed. She watched them with the faint smile of someone seeing hope take root where hardship usually lived. Then the diner door slammed open. Little Jim burst inside, chest heaving, newspaper bag bouncing against his side. He could barely get the words out. "Mr. McKenna!" The room fell silent. Jim pointed back toward town, eyes wide with fear. "Jessica Dunham told her husband you tried to rape her." The words hit like a gunshot. Jethro didn't move, didn't breathe, and he comin'. Jim gasped, nearly choking on the words. "Him and some of the mill boys. They got bats, chains," he swallowed hard, "and rope." The word landed heavy, final. Outside, boots crunched against gravel, not hurried, not chaotic, measured. Men walking with the calm certainty of righteousness, the kind born from anger dressed up as justice. Their honor, they believed, had been stained, and blood was the only thing that could wash it clean. Jethro turned slowly toward the window. The sunlight felt colder now. He counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. More shapes moving behind them. Every face set the same way, hard, certain. The kind of certainty that didn't require truth and meant finality for any blackman. Nola's hand clamped around his arm. Her voice barely existed when she spoke. "They gonna kill you?" Jethro didn't answer right away. He just watched the men coming closer, watched one of them coil the rope lazily in his hands like the ending had already been decided. He turned back to her. She already knew. She had been with him all night, laughing, talking about tomorrow, about children, about turning strings into something lasting. Proof didn't matter here. Witness didn't matter. In the Delta, accusation was verdict enough. Their eyes locked. Fear passed between them. Then acceptance. Decision made without a word spoken aloud. "We meet at the old church," Jethro said quietly. "The bend past the cypress road." Nola nodded, fighting the tremor in her breath. 1 mile. Outside, a fist slammed against the diner door. The glass rattled, and the hunt began. Mrs. Ruby appeared beside him suddenly, gripping his arm hard enough to hurt. "Boy," she said, voice sharp and urgent, "you go out the back." He hesitated. She squeezed tighter. "I'll buy you time." Then from outside the shouting started. Someone kicked over a trash can. Glass shattered. Mrs. Ruby pushed him toward the kitchen. "Run," she whispered. Jethro grabbed his hat, looked once at Nola, then disappeared through the rear door into the blazing morning light. Behind him, Mrs. Ruby turned toward the front entrance just as angry fists struck the diner door again. Jethro ran, didn't stop, didn't look back. The road blurred beneath his feet as strings came into view through the trees, sunlight flashing against the tin roof like salvation. He burst through the door, hands shaking, suitcase, money from beneath the loose floorboard, his guitar, always the guitar. He slung the strap over his shoulder, breath ragged, heart hammering so hard it hurt. Then shouting erupted outside, boots pounding. Jethro turned just as 6 men rounded the corner of the juke joint. They saw him, their faces lit with recognition, with victory. He lunged for the door, too late. It slammed inward under their weight. Wood splintered. The men surged inside, driving him backward across the floor. "No!" Jethro shouted, raising the guitar. He swung hard. The body cracked against one man's skull with a hollow thud, dropping him instantly for half a second. Hope. Then fists came, one after another. A boot caught his ribs. Something popped. Air vanished from his lungs. They beat him methodically. Punches, kicks, grunts of effort. Not rage, work. Jethro curled instinctively, arms over his head, as blood filled his mouth. Someone tore the guitar from his hands. It struck the wall. Wood shattered. Strings snapped with a screaming metallic cry. Jethro saw it break, and something inside him broke with it. The only thing that ever made him more than another man trying to survive the Delta. Destroyed. They hauled him upright, hands tied tight behind his back. The rope slid around his neck, rough hemp scraping skin. They dragged him outside toward the great cypress tree. Spanish moss swayed gently overhead. The world tilted, one eye swelling shut, breath shallow, every inhale stabbing through what he knew was a broken rib. They threw the rope over a branch, pulled. Jethro staggered onto his toes. Another pull. They pulled. The rope tightened. Jethro's boots left the ground. For a moment he fought instinctively, legs kicking, breath clawing for air that would not come. The world narrowed to pressure and light and distant sound. Faces blurred beneath him, men watching, some angry, some afraid, none stopping it. The great cypress tree held his weight without judgment. The delta wind stirred the Spanish moss as Jethro's movement slowed, then weakened, then stopped altogether. Silence settled. One man spat into the dirt. "Shouldn't have touched her," another muttered, already turning away. The work was done. They began to leave. That's when the woods went quiet. No insects, no birds. Even the river seemed to pause. A smell rolled into the clearing. Wet earth, rot, ancient musk. The first man noticed it and turned as a shadow stood between the trees. Large, ominous, powerful. Then the Bigfoot stepped forward, 9 feet of black fury emerging into the morning light. Its eyes found Jethro first, the body hanging from the rope, the broken guitar beneath the tree. The creature stopped. Its chest rose sharply. A sound escaped it, low, wounded, something deeper than rage. Then its gaze shifted to the men as it stepped on the road, blocking them from leaving. They froze. One dropped his bat. Another whispered, "Jesus Christ!" That's when the Bigfoot moved. It happened too fast for the men to understand. 1 second, they stood beneath the cypress tree, breathing hard from murder. The next, the Bigfoot moved. A blur of black muscle and swamp shadow erupted from the tree line. A massive arm swung. The closest mill worker never even screamed. The blow lifted him clean off his feet, his body sailing through humid air before slamming into a cypress trunk with a wet, splintering crack. The sound of bones breaking echoed through the marsh like gunfire. He slid down the bark wrong, limbs folding where they should not bend. Silence lasted half a heartbeat. Then chaos. Another man was seized, screaming from the ground, his boots kicking uselessly, lifted overhead as though he weighed nothing at all. The creature hurled him into a shallow ditch. His spine struck exposed stone with a crunch that ended the scream instantly. Mud churned, men scattered, one slipped, scrambling to rise. The Bigfoot's foot came down. The ground shook. The scream stopped beneath crushing weight. Panic shattered whatever courage lynching had given them. Chains fell from trembling hands. A bat disappeared into the reeds. Prayers replaced threats. They ran. But the delta offered no escape. The creature moved among them with terrifying quiet. Rage held tight and focused. It stepped behind another fleeing man. 2 massive hands closed around his skull. A sharp, final crack split the night. His body collapsed before the others even realized he was dead. Beneath Jethro's hanging body, something caught the creature's attention. The broken neck of the guitar, mud-stained, snapped, silent, slowly, reverently. It lifted the shattered instrument. The dangling strings swayed like torn veins. A growl rolled into his chest. Grief, then fury. It turned and backhanded another fleeing worker with the jagged wood. The impact spun the man completely around, his body collapsing lifeless into the grass. Only one remained. Mark Dunham, Jessica's husband, ran. Terror lent speed to his legs as he crashed through brush, branches clawing his face. He stumbled onto the road and kept running, lungs burning, mind refusing to look back. Behind him, the creature stood beneath the hanging body of his victim's friend, chest heaving, watching, holding the broken guitar like a weapon, like a memory. Mark didn't stop until town lights appeared, until his house rose from the darkness. He burst through the door, slammed it shut, hand shaking as he threw the lock. Safe. He laughed weakly, hysteria creeping into his voice. Jessica entered from the hallway, already pulling on her coat, guilt buried beneath something colder, something proud. "We killed him," Mark gasped. The wall exploded inward. Wood shattered like dry bone. The enormous shape came through with unstoppable force, collapsing timber and plaster onto Mark. The weight crushed him instantly, his scream smothered beneath splintered beams and fur and earth smell. Silence followed. Mud dripped onto the kitchen floor. Jessica screamed and stumbled backward, fleeing into the kitchen corner. The creature stepped inside. No roar, no wild rage, only judgment. Its shadow swallowed her. Slowly, it raised the broken neck of Jethro's guitar. The snapped strings swayed, whispering softly in the still air, like the last note of a song that refused to die. Jessica sank to the floor, cowering near the cupboards. A shadowing form loomed over her. You don't understand." The blow came fast, final. The house fell silent moments later. When the creature emerged again, the town remained unaware. Morning sunlight touched its fur as it walked back toward the delta, toward the cypress tree, toward the place where music once lived. In its hand, it carried the shattered neck of Jethro McKenna's guitar, carefully, like something sacred. It disappeared back into the forest. Nola, Mrs. Ruby, and other townsfolk buried Jethro near strings, and for years afterward, folks swore that on quiet summer afternoons, when the wind moved just right through the trees, you could still hear blues music drifting across the delta, as if something out there remembered the last song ever played by Jethro Strings McKenna. The delta didn't forget him, and neither did his friend.
There was a time in this country when the worst crime a man could commit was simply being born the wrong color. A time when justice didn't wear a blindfold. It chose sides. When accusations became verdicts and trees became courtrooms. In places like the Delta, the law didn't always come to save you. Sometimes, something else had to answer. An unlikely advocate, a silent witness, a guardian born from myth, delivering the justice men refused to give. I like to believe that somewhere, in another universe, Jethro McKenna and Nola grew old together. That strings stayed open. That music replaced hatred. That love won. But this story belongs to this universe, the one where strange fruit once hung from southern trees, and sometimes still does. If you felt this story, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And if you'd like more nightmares and legends, my books, Blood in Brooklyn and The Hunt for Dogman, are available now in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. Until next time, beloved, keep the lights on. And remember, monsters exist. They just don't always live in the woods, and they don't always wear fur.